On the night of December 19th, 1979, the air in Cedar Rapids, Iowa was sharp and cold. Christmas was 6 days away, the kind of cold that settles quietly, that makes parking lots empty faster than usual, that turns breath into fog, that makes people hurry home. At approximately 9:18 p.m., a teenage girl exited Westdale Mall. She had been shopping for gifts. Her name was Michelle Martinko. She was 18 years old. Michelle walked alone across the snow-dusted parking lot toward her car. It was a short walk. She had made it dozens of times before. She never made it home. Hours later, her car was found exactly where she left it. The driver's side door was open. The interior light was still on, and Michelle Martinko was nowhere in sight. By early morning, police had sealed off the parking lot. Tire tracks crisscrossed the snow. Footprints overlapped one another, and beneath the glow of overhead lights, investigators made a grim discovery. Michelle Martinko's body was found not far from her vehicle. She had been violently attacked. The brutality of the crime shocked even experienced officers. But what unsettled them most was not the violence. It was the absence of answers. There were no witnesses, no screams reported, no sign of robbery. Her purse was still inside the car. This was not a random act. It was fast, personal, and deliberate. The investigation began immediately. Cedar Rapids was a quiet city. Crimes like this did not happen there, especially not to girls like Michelle. She was a straight-A student, a music lover, a teenager planning her future. Her parents, Albert and Janet Martinko, were devastated. Friends gathered in stunned silence. At the funeral, the church overflowed. People searched for something, anything that made sense, but sense never came. Police canvassed the mall. They questioned employees, shoppers, security guards. Hundreds of tips poured in. None of them led anywhere. In 1979, forensic science had limits. DNA testing did not exist. Investigators relied on witness accounts, physical clues, behavioral profiling. Evidence was collected, carefully preserved, but technology had not yet caught up to intent. Michelle's murder became a cold case almost immediately, not because police stopped caring, but because the trail went dark. For Michelle's mother, Janet, the case never went cold. She wrote letters, she made phone calls, she asked the same questions year after year. Every Christmas was harder than the last. Michelle's room remained untouched. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Janet believed, quietly, fiercely, that one day someone would answer. Time passed, and with it, hope faded for everyone except her. The years moved forward. The mall changed. Investigators retired. Michelle Martinko became a name people remembered vaguely, a tragedy from long ago. But the evidence remained, locked away, waiting. In the early 2000s, forensic science changed everything. DNA testing advanced. Cold cases across the country were reopened. In Cedar Rapids, investigators returned to Michelle's file. The evidence, preserved for decades, was tested, and for the first time, it spoke. The DNA did not match anyone in the system, but it was enough to wait, enough to try again. In 2018, nearly 39 years after Michelle was murdered, investigators uploaded the DNA profile into a national database. This time, there was a match. The name was Jerry Burns, a truck driver, a man who had lived an ordinary life, no violent criminal record, no connection, at least none anyone remembered, but the DNA was undeniable. Police watched Burns carefully. They collected discarded items, a cup, a straw. The results confirmed it. Jerry Burns was arrested in December 2018. There was no chase, no resistance, just a man confronted with a truth that waited nearly 4 decades to reach him. Burns confessed. He pleaded guilty. He admitted to killing Michelle Martinko. There was no explanation that could justify it. There never is. In August 2021, Jerry Burns was sentenced to life in prison. For Michelle's family, justice came, but far too late. Janet Martinko did not live to see the arrest. She died in 2016, never knowing the name, never hearing the truth. Michelle was 18 years old. She loved music. She loved life. For 39 years, her story remained unfinished, until science caught up, until persistence mattered, until silence finally broke. Some cases aren't forgotten. They're waiting for the moment when the truth can no longer hide. Michelle Martinko waited nearly 4 decades, and when justice finally arrived, it didn't announce itself. It simply stood up and said her name. When Jerry Burns pleaded guilty, the courtroom was quiet. There was no outburst, no visible relief, no sense of victory. For prosecutors, the case was closed. For investigators, the work was finished. But for those who had lived with Michelle's absence for nearly 40 years, the confession did not bring the clarity they expected. It brought something else: finality. And finality, it turns out, is complicated. Jerry Burns never offered a full explanation. He did not describe planning. He did not describe motive. He did not describe remorse in any way that could be measured. What he admitted to was the act itself and nothing more. Why Michelle? Why that night? Why such violence? Those answers never came, and for many, they never mattered as much as one simple truth. He had lived free for nearly 4 decades. Burns had been questioned briefly in 1979. At the time, nothing connected him to the crime. No witnesses, no technology, no reason to keep looking. He moved on. He worked. He traveled. He lived a life that appeared ordinary. Meanwhile, Michelle's family lived in suspended time. This contrast between freedom and waiting became one of the hardest truths to accept, not because the system failed deliberately, but because it failed quietly. By the time justice arrived, much had already been lost. Michelle's parents aged under the weight of unanswered questions. Her mother, Janet, passed away without knowing the name of the man who killed her daughter. Friends moved on, carrying memory instead of closure. Justice, when it comes late, does not rewind lives, it only explains them. The conviction of Jerry Burns was not just about one case. It became a symbol, a reminder that evidence matters even when it waits decades, that preservation matters, that time does not erase truth. Across the country, departments revisited shelves of unsolved cases, cases once considered impossible, cases that now had a voice. For every case solved after decades, there are families still waiting, people who live between hope and resignation. Cold cases do not fade for them, they echo, in empty bedrooms, at holiday tables, in moments that should feel normal but never do. Michelle Martinko's case became a reminder of that reality, not because it was rare, but because it was familiar. In the years following the conviction, Michelle's story was retold, in articles, in documentaries, in court records, but those closest to her preferred to remember something simpler: a teenager who loved music, a daughter who mattered, a life defined by more than how it ended. Unseen does not exist to glorify crime. It exists to return focus to the people left behind. Justice is often portrayed as a resolution, an ending, but in cases like this, justice is not an ending. It is an acknowledgement, an admission that the truth mattered, even after decades of silence, that waiting was not foolish, that memory was not misplaced. Michelle Martinko was 18 years old when she walked out of a mall in Iowa. She never made it home. For nearly 40 years, the truth waited,
Not lost, not erased, just unseen. And when it finally emerged, it did not undo the past, but it did something just as important. It proved that silence does not mean absence, and that some stories, no matter how long they wait, will always find their way back into the light. When a guilty plea is entered, the legal system moves on. Paperwork is filed, evidence is archived, files are closed. But stories like Michelle Martinko's do not end in courtrooms. They end or continue in kitchens, bedrooms, and quiet moments where no verdict can reach. For the Martinko family, the conviction of Jerry Burns did not divide their lives into before and after. It divided them into something far more complex, before the truth and after the waiting stopped. The day after Jerry Burns pleaded guilty, Cedar Rapids woke up like it always did. Traffic moved, stores opened, people went to work. There were no sirens, no public ceremony. For nearly 40 years, Michelle's murder had existed as a quiet wound in the city's memory. Now that wound had a name attached to it, but naming the truth does not erase what it has taken. For Michelle's surviving family members, the days after the conviction felt strangely empty. There was no next phone call to make, no next appeal to push, no unanswered question left for police. The fight that had defined so many years was suddenly over, and with it came a silence that felt unfamiliar. Grief does not disappear when justice arrives, it changes shape. For decades, grief had been active. It had a purpose. It fueled phone calls, letters, follow-ups, hope. After the conviction, grief became still, and stillness can be harder to carry. Some family members described it as losing Michelle all over again, not to violence, but to time, because now there was nothing left to chase. Jerry Burns never gave a full account of why he killed Michelle Martinko. He did not describe a plan. He did not offer insight into what drove him that night. The absence of motive left a gap that no sentence could fill. Psychologists often say that the human mind searches for meaning in tragedy, but some crimes resist meaning. They exist without reason, and in those cases, justice does not come from understanding the why. It comes from refusing to let the act disappear into silence. One of the most unsettling aspects of Michelle's case was not the violence itself, it was the ordinariness of the man responsible. Burns was not a figure people whispered about. He was not known to be dangerous. He was not watched. He blended in. This reality challenges the way many people imagine crime. There was no warning sign loud enough to hear, no moment where someone could say, "Of course it was him." And that truth unsettled investigators just as much as the crime, because it meant the line between safety and danger was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. It would be easy to label Michelle Martinko's case as a failure of law enforcement, but doing so oversimplifies the reality of 1979. Investigators collected evidence correctly. They preserved it. They followed leads. What they lacked was not effort, it was time. Technology had not yet arrived. The legal system did not ignore Michelle. It simply could not hear her yet. This distinction matters because it underscores a critical truth. Cold cases are not forgotten cases. They are unfinished conversations. DNA is often described as evidence, but in cold cases, DNA functions more like memory. It remembers what humans cannot. It preserves truth. When witnesses disappear, recollections fade, and landscapes change. In Michelle's case, a fragment of biological material survived nearly 40 years, not because anyone knew it would matter, but because someone believed it might. That belief changed everything. After the conviction, Michelle Martinko's case was cited in discussions far beyond Iowa. It became an example used in training sessions, cold case conferences, legislative debates. Law enforcement agencies revisited their shelves of unsolved cases, cases once considered impossible, cases that now had a voice. For every case solved after decades, there are families still waiting, people who live between hope and resignation. Cold cases do not fade for them, they echo, in empty bedrooms, at holiday tables, in moments that should feel normal but never do. Michelle Martinko's case became a reminder of that reality, not because it was rare, but because it was familiar. In the years following the conviction, Michelle's story was retold, in articles, in documentaries, in court records, but those closest to her preferred to remember something simpler: a teenager who loved music, a daughter who mattered, a life defined by more than how it ended. Unseen does not exist to glorify crime. It exists to return focus to the people left behind. Justice is often portrayed as a resolution, an ending, but in cases like this, justice is not an ending. It is an acknowledgement, an admission that the truth mattered, even after decades of silence, that waiting was not foolish, that memory was not misplaced. Michelle Martinko was 18 years old when she walked out of a mall in Iowa. She never made it home. For nearly 40 years, the truth waited, not lost, not erased, just unseen. And when it finally emerged, it did not undo the past, but it did something just as important. It proved that silence does not mean absence, and that some stories, no matter how long they wait, will always find their way back into the light. When a guilty plea is entered, the legal system moves on. Paperwork is filed. Evidence is archived.
There is a moment that comes at the end of every long investigation. It is not announced. It does not arrive with sound. It arrives quietly when there is nothing left to prove. For nearly 4 decades, Michelle Martinko's name existed inside a question. Who did this? Why did it happen? Will we ever know? After Jerry Burns stood in court and accepted responsibility, the questions stopped multiplying. They did not disappear, they simply stopped growing. And for the first time since 1979, Michelle's story no longer pointed forward, it pointed inward, toward memory. Finality is often misunderstood. People imagine it as relief, as peace, as a clean ending. But for families who wait decades for answers, finality is something else entirely. It is the moment when hope, long carried, has nowhere left to go. For years, hope had been active. It demanded effort. It created purpose. Once the case was solved, hope became still. And stillness required adjustment. Family members spoke of an unfamiliar quiet. No more waiting for phone calls. No more wondering if today would be the day. For the first time in nearly 40 years, nothing was pending. And that, in its own way, was heavy. Michelle Martinko was 18 years old. She would have been in her late 50s when the truth came out. She would have lived through decades her family could only imagine. Careers, friendships, ordinary days. No conviction can return those things. No sentence can compensate for time stolen. The justice system does not pretend otherwise. Its role is not restoration, it is recognition. There was no lengthy trial, no jury deliberation, no dramatic testimony. Jerry Burns pleaded guilty. He waived his right to contest the evidence. This decision denied the public a spectacle, but it spared the family a re-examination of violence. Sometimes, justice is quiet by design. And in this case, quiet was appropriate. When Jerry Burns admitted guilt, he did not frame himself as misunderstood. He did not argue circumstance. He accepted responsibility. But acceptance does not equal understanding. Burns never explained the internal moment that led him to act.
And perhaps that omission is its own truth. Some acts do not have explanations that satisfy. They only have consequences. Cedar Rapids absorbed the news quietly. There were no protests, no mass reactions, just acknowledgement. The case had lingered for so long that resolution felt less like breaking news and more like the closing of a chapter everyone remembered starting. People who had been teenagers themselves in 1979 read the headlines decades later. They recognized a name and felt the weight of time all at once. Cold cases occupy a strange place in public memory. They are neither past nor present. They exist in suspension. Michelle Martinko's case lived there for nearly 4 decades. When it was finally solved, it forced a reckoning, not just with the crime, but with the years it had consumed. Time does not move evenly. For some families, it stops. For others, it rushes forward. Justice arrives when those timelines collide. There is a responsibility that comes with retelling stories like this one, to avoid spectacle, to resist simplification, to remember that behind every case file is a human life. Unseen exists for that reason, not to dramatize tragedy, but to document endurance. Michelle's story is not important because of how it ended. It is important because of how long it was carried. Waiting changes people. It alters how time feels. It reshapes identity. For Michelle's family, waiting became a companion, an unwanted one, but constant. When the waiting ended, there was no guidebook for what came next, no instructions for how to live without it. They had to learn that on their own. Michelle Martinko's murder serves as a warning, not of danger alone, but of assumptions. Assumptions about safety, about familiarity, about the people we pass without noticing. It reminds us that violence does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind normalcy. And that reality is unsettling, but necessary to confront. The evidence in Michelle's case survived longer than many memories. It outlasted investigators. It outlasted witnesses. It outlasted hope. That endurance was not accidental. It was the result of care, of belief, of someone, somewhere, deciding that even if answers were not possible now, they might be someday. That decision mattered. Michelle Martinko's case did not give her family back their daughter, but it gave them something else: truth. Truth does not heal everything, but it anchors memory. It allows grief to settle instead of drift, and sometimes that's enough to move forward. For years, Michelle's story was unfinished. It ended in a question mark. Now it ends with a period. Not because everything was resolved, but because the truth was finally spoken. Completion does not mean happiness. It means honesty. If Michelle Martinko's story teaches anything, it is this: time does not erase truth. It only delays it. And while justice may move slowly, it moves. On a cold night in December 1979, Michelle Martinko walked across a parking lot and disappeared. For 39 years, her absence echoed, in files, in memories, in unanswered questions. When the truth finally emerged, it did not undo the past, but it did something quieter and more lasting. It acknowledged that a life mattered, that waiting mattered, and that even after decades of silence, some stories are never truly lost. They are only unseen.